this podcast, we will be looking at storytellers, stories, and the reasons that oral storytelling is important in our world today. You would think with all the technology we have available that stories do not have a place anymore, but they are needed more than ever. For in storytelling is where we find truth, we find reality, and we find the heart of what it is to be human. Welcome to the heart of storytelling. My name is Alyssa Curtain, and let's go on an adventure. Welcome to this episode of the Heart of Storytelling. Our guest today is the head of the Australian Fairy Tale Society and is an experienced storyteller based in Sydney, Australia. And this is Jo Henwood, and rather than giving you a blurb to introduce her, I would like her to introduce herself through our interview, which she does. In the interview, we talk about many things, and one of the amazing things I got out of it was the relationship of story for us as a sense of belonging. And so hopefully you will understand that as we go through the journey with Jo today. I hope you enjoy the interview. Here's Jo. Well, welcome to this week's interview. It is with the wonderful Jo Henwood. Hi, Jo.
Hi, Alyssa.
Good to start with our interview, could I get you to just give us a bit of an idea about who you are and how you got your start in storytelling?
I love to talk. So that's basically it. The secret of a happy life, Alyssa, is to find something that you would happily do for free forever and get someone to pay you for it. Yes?
Yes.
So I joined the Storytelling Guild, the New South Wales Storytelling Guild, in 99, and at that time realised that I had been following that quest, following the deer through the woods all my life, because I was always a reader, I was always a consumer of stories, I'd watch films, operettas, when all the different ways that stories are shared, I already loved and was happy to talk, happy to share, happy to read, happy to write, all of those things, all the little threads going on, which had led me at the same time to becoming a tour guide, which again, somebody's paying me to talk and to answer questions. And in the it was called Sydney Living Museums. Oh, no, it was called the Historic Houses Trust at that stage. And they had the performance reviews that had obviously been named by a man. It was a performance management system. So that meant it was PMS. So okay, so we just went female-dominated profession, and still they stuff it up. Anyway, so in that, when they're talking about how could you, can you think of any ways that you could improve your performance as a tour guide here in this historic house? And because I was already a folkie and going to national folk festivals, I knew there was such a thing as storytelling. I'd seen it. And so, yes, I could go and be trained by a storyteller. So I went along to arranged a meeting with Yuri, the storyteller, and within about 7 minutes of him just talking about what he did, I'd forgotten all about the professional relevance and all that sort of thing. Oh, this is it. This is fantastic. He showed me all these books of folk tales and this and all that sort of thing, and it was just yes, yeah.
Wow.
This is. You know the feeling, don't you?
I do, yeah. And I've got a friend here in Perth who's had something very similar. So there's that when you just know, it's quite an extraordinary feeling. So what is it that what do you get out of storytelling? What's the thing that's underlying that?
I guess it's two things, and it's right. When I do workshops, I'll talk about you serve the audience, you serve the story, but you also have to serve yourself. And so there are two layers. I am most myself when I'm pretending to be other people, when I'm in performance mode. So you might not know this because I'm the hostess. When we encounter each other, I'm being president of the Australian Fairy Tale Society, and so I'm sort of hostessing people. But if I'm just Jo, I'm the person who chooses to wash the dishes at the back of the room, and tidy up things and just go in. And I wouldn't introduce myself there. But once I'm a storyteller, then I have something and I can share it. And then I can be exuberant and most myself, stronger and more creative and more exotic and more theatrical and no, having most fun. But all of that is in, I hope, service to the story and service to the audience. You get,
Yeah.
I've got a great story. You're going to love it, and I have to find the best way so that you will love it and you will see just how fabulous it is.
Yeah, amazing. So do you have like a process for preparing this or a way that you pick a story? What's your
Well, yeah, it's terribly scientific, Alyssa. I'm skimming, and I go, ooh. So that's what you're looking for.
so you're looking for the ooh.
Yeah, and you just don't. So, I mean, a lot of stuff is very pragmatic. It's so and so needs a workshop. I've got a concert for such and such an audience. What can I do? And so it'll be Google, and then the books that I've sort of skimmed when I bought them, and then put them back on the shelf. And hold on a minute. And so you're skimming through, skim, and I'm waiting for that moment where I go, that's intriguing. That's got juice,
Yeah.
that's the flair, the thing that's not too much of a cliche. It's not already been told. There's something where I feel the story hasn't been told in some way, like there's a
Okay.
point of view, a perspective, a character, something that I can go, yeah. And that again is in service to me, because all of art, I think, works best as a mirror. You see yourself in it. The reason you love this painting or this novel or something, there's something that is reflective.
Yeah,
And
beautiful.
yeah, and when I first, this is kind of worrying, because like the first year, when you just really slowly getting the stories, and they're really painstaking, you take weeks to prepare. Not anymore. Just so slapdash these days. But I got to some point, I looked at the stories and get every one of my stories, the man dies.
I was going to ask if you had a theme, but you obviously already know your theme that you had for. Poor man.
Somebody has to live sometime.
Oh, dear Joe. So when you're putting like a show together or an event, so do you have like 4 or 5 stories ready, or what's your?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on the timing, doesn't it?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, so 10-ish minutes is the right, the bummometer,
yeah.
so
Okay,
long Australian audiences can sit without fidgeting is
okay.
around 10 minutes.
Have you found
Um,
that overseas that it's different?
a lot longer, can be a
Yeah,
lot.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, like Asian will go on, and I think they kind of sit at 15 minutes. I went to a concert at St Donats in Wales, and there was a 90-minute story, and
Wow.
you could sort of say, it's a monologue, but it was storytelling. He was just
Yeah.
kept on going.
Wow. What an extraordinary thing to be able to hold a story and hold the space for 90 minutes. That does my head in. Like my longest I think that I've tried is about 15.
Yeah,
And yeah, even then I'm like, oh, that was a long thing. Like, I feel like I've
but
been talking forever.
don't, not for your sake and not for the audience. People
Yeah,
don't want. You're much better, and I don't have them, but you're much better to have lots of 5-minute stories, because
yeah,
that's what I really want.
yeah.
And it can be really good too when you're going, am I losing them? Is it, like, can I hold them for another 10 minutes? But yeah, we haven't done, like you can use it as fillers in the trifle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you ever been in an event where you've lost the audience and you've had to shift and move into something else really quickly?
Yeah, but that was mostly that's to very early, like I can
Very-
remember pastors in the beginning, and
Yeah.
just not knowing and not having enough control over what I was doing, to be feeling this room turn to mud, like
Oh my gosh.
I'm thinking I'm just hearing my voice. I've been listening to my own voice forever, and just not having the power to pull out and go around there. These days I'm doing a lot of preschool storytelling, not
Mm.
because I have, a contract, and it's happening a lot. And that is a lot of, okay, I've seen the first one move. How much longer can I keep the ones who are there? All that sort of thing. And preschoolers tend to be a fairly, shall we say, honest audience. They'll just
Oh.
get up and
I need to go to the toilet. I'm off.
they've gone. So reading that, and can immediately, and that's really easy because you just stop, and they're not going to say, but what happened next, Joe? Tell us more. They're just going to say, you didn't go, right, so what do you think your name is? You
Mhm.
just launch a song there. And I think that's it. Thank you for having me. You've been lovely. And just move on.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so you can be swift enough with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
As you get better, I suppose, because I'm an emerging beginner. So as you get better, obviously those things come more easily. Do you have
Yeah.
a favorite age group or type of audience that you like telling to?
I think I do like adults just because they get it all. And you've got the layers. So if you're looking at cognitive development, like the babies only have copying and the wordplay, and then you build up and you're getting plot. So you're layering up as you go, and you can do more with 9-year-olds, so they're more fun than 5-year-olds, and you can do more with 12-year-olds. Teenagers are a challenging audience because
Yeah.
they kind of shrink down, and they're being so cool as an audience in front of other people, while simultaneously they've got that, they're durians, aren't they, all prickly on the outside and mushy on the
Mm,
inside.
yeah.
So they're hard to play to both elements. They're soft, mushy insides, and they're prickly outsides. So they're trickier. But once you get to adults, then you can tell a strong, deep story, with the sort of stories that I'm loving to share, tragic and scary and all that sort of, and just,
And men
torture.
dying.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know you through the Australian Fairy Tale Society. So my assumption is that you like telling fairy tales. Is that true?
Well, yes, but it's actually not my favorite genre.
Oh,
I
really?
Yeah, no, in fact, it's probably third. Because
Wow.
like historical stories, Australian historical stories, I love to share because they're not as well known, and they're quirky and interesting and deep, and they're about us. And it's kind of appalling that if you've got an Australian, like you've been to the Sydney Storytelling Conference, how many Australian stories did you hear?
Oh, I only went to the fairy tale. I didn't get to the Sydney
Oh,
conference. Yeah.
in 25 you will
But
go.
even still, I haven't heard a lot of Australian story. I mean, I heard one this year, but
Yeah,
I haven't heard a lot of Australian stories. And yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't considered that.
yeah, and internationals will come to us and come to that conference and sort of go, but nobody told Australian
Oh,
stories.
wow.
Yeah, so I find, I really want to tell that. And because, my day job is tour guiding and working in historic and heritage sites, I have access to finding the ooh stories, the quirky, the ghost stories,
Mm.
the fraudsters, all those sort of things. So I love that. I also love the myths and legends because they're deep, and I love telling epics and sharing epics because they are the big stories and they belong to the cultures of the world. And I want people,
Mm. Mm.
and they're tragic and romantic and you know
But
full
they're
of
real though, aren't they? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Then comes fairy tales, and fairy tales, one of the reasons I like them is because they have their roots that dig down into history and to myth, as
Mm.
well the magic there. And with the Australian Fairy Tale Society, when we're creating Australian interpretations, then I can pull in all those elements. And I do enjoy the creative challenges there, Cinderella on Go to Ireland in the 1950s, and things like that. Nellie
Mm.
Wood, or Cinderella at Opera in the Outback.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I remember when I was in Tasmania, I started researching, trying to find Tasmanian stories because that's where I was born. And of
Yeah.
course, the only stories I could find were ghost stories. Tasmania is full of ghost stories, and I'm not a real fan of ghost stories. So I felt a bit disillusioned by not being able to find, the juicy stories that resonated with me. Yeah. So, but if you love ghost stories, Tasmania is the place to go because of the history and then the cannibalism and all the things that
I
happen there.
They're great. I did one in there was a storytelling festival there. Oh, must have been 15 years ago. And I performed in the courthouse and did crime stories and did murder mysteries and things there. So that was fun.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's
And I
awesome.
loved Yeah. So I've sort of, because there's this intersection of being a tour guide and being a storyteller, I've kind of focused a lot on storytelling in heritage sites, museum theatre. And I'm a member of IMTALAP, the International Museum Theatre Alliance of Asia Pacific. And I'm the person who at IMTALAP events says, storytelling is a museum theatre as well, so that going, which is so much fun. And because it is, how much time you spend as a storyteller building up the atmosphere, create so that people have got that sensory connection to what does it look like, what does it sound like, what does it feel like. Well, the job's done.
Mm.
If you old house or a beach or wherever, the work is done for you.
Yeah, you can create the atmosphere within the atmosphere that you're in, especially if there's like an echo in the room or yeah, it's a really good sense, a sense of place, I guess, isn't it? Giving a sense of place without having to say it.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
So
The
what?
story's place.
Yeah.
We get our cultural identity is with the story. So the people, the place, and the stories together are necessarily interwoven to create community. And that's why invaders one of the first things they'll do is prohibit the language of the
Mm.
local. Because if you stop the language, the stories can't be told. And if people can't hold onto their stories, they have no soul.
Mm. So that leads into my next question, which is, this podcast is called The Heart of Storytelling. And I guess what I want to get to is what is the heart of storytelling for you? And talking about a sense of place and belonging, I think, is probably
Relation, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so relationships too, because if you think about it, all your relationships are built about shared stories. And the longer you know somebody, the more of their stories you know, and the more shared stories you have. And when you've been apart, you reweave the bridge between you by saying, so what have you been doing? And people will tell the story of what they've been doing, who they are, what they are.
Mm.
And you build that all up together. So that's the relationship that's built between two people or between a family or a community or a nation or a religion. It's all
Mm.
built.
Yeah, wow. I'd never considered that. I'd never thought about it in that way. And so, on the back of that, then why do you think oral storytelling, is so important today in our really tech-heavy world where everything seems to be online and the world's changing very fast? So, why do we still need oral story?
Because it's so human. Because there's nothing like being in the same place. Like you remember during the lockdown, we did Zoom and there were benefits. We reached out internationally and nationally. but it's always going to be second best by a long, long way, because you need to be in the same room. You need to have that shared breath, the warmth of being there, the place itself, even if it's a sterile, boring environment. The storyteller has transformed it, has worked the magic and drawn the audience in to share this magic circle around it, where the shared dreaming. And that's what we need. That's the fire that burns within us all, that we're all carrying around our little flames, but we need to bring them together and gather around that shared flame to know who we are.
Shared dreaming. I love that. I love that. I think, what you've just said, that sounds like that's the heart of storytelling for you, is the shared dreaming, whether it's individual, family, community, or globally, I suppose, really, isn't it, the shared dreaming? Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Thanks, Jo. So I just wanted to see if there were any experiences that you've had in storytelling that were really memorable, like that stand out as highlight moments for you,
Okay, so have you heard of the trance?
like
Do you
trance
know?
dance? No?
No, no. No, it's a thing in storytelling, and it's where you hypnotize people.
Oh, yes.
And yes, and you draw them into that magic so that they are paused. And you know when it happens. It's not about eye contact, because some people, your audience could be underneath a table and staring up, and they're just projecting the screen. But you can feel the electricity on you, and you pause, and they're there. And and you can't do it with outdoor storytelling, because a bird or a plane or something will interrupt it. But you can flow. And I had one time of telling Theseus the Minotaur in a boring little, community room, and there's a bunch of 11-year-old boys there, and they were just, it was there, like I knew I had everything. And the other one that leaps to mind was just a gift, Alyssa. I had so little to do with it, but so um, last year, Gemma Farr, as part of the FEAST, the Federation of Asian Storytellers, organised a story walk through the Lycian Way in southern Turkey, along the turquoise coast of the Mediterranean, and so we'd be walking through the days, have an early supper, and then we'd return to these ancient sites. There's theatres, there's stone theatres that all gathered around, and storytellers from FEAST, so from all around the world, so Russian, Scottish, Jewish, Canadian, Australians, heaps of Singaporeans and Indians, and we'd perform in these ancient sites. And we had gone through, and I'd been sort of hesitating, like they'd worked out the days and who wants to perform there. And I'd sort of said yes, thinking that they'd knock me back for most of them, and they didn't. But then there was the final one, and we'd just been past the burning rocks. So there are flames that are caught within the volcanic rock. So we'd walked over them, and those flames have not gone out. Like they're thousands of years old. They're continuing to burn, and that's the origin for the chimera. So these flying demons made of flames that can capture you. And then we were just a little way from am I saying Olympus, like what they named as Olympus, to go up. And so that was the night to do it. And so I told the story of Bellerophon and Pegasus going to Olympus with the chimera up there. So I just stood there with the setting sun in the stone theatre and called out, "Bellerophon must die." So,
Oh, how special. Oh, that sounds like a wonderful experience. And you had them in trance in there, I imagine.
I don't know, but I see it was so much the right story, and everybody knew what I was talking about. I knew that when I talked about the flames, they all had it in their mind. I didn't need to explain anything,
Yeah.
because we were sharing an experience, and they wanted me to tell that story, because if I hadn't, nobody else would have. And that story had to be told at that place at that time with us.
Wow. So that's another example of the setting, or the sense of place being part of the story as well, which is quite an exciting thing. So you've mentioned a couple of myths there. I'm going to ask you your favorite child sort of question. If you could narrow down one of your top, you don't have to say your top, because I think it's almost impossible to, you cannot say your favorite fairy tale or your favorite story to tell. Some people might have that, but I think even at this early stage of my career, I would find that very hard already. Do you have a favorite?
Of all time, or for particular audiences, or
Well,
there
for either, yeah.
see, every child group, every group under 6, I have a go-to story because I know it's going to work.
Yeah.
The little old lady who was not afraid of anything, and and that just works brilliantly. But I heard when I was a child, there was an interview with somebody who had, like, parents who had something like 18 children, and the interviewer said to them, who is your favorite child? And they answered, the sick child while they are sick, the
Oh,
happy they are happy, the sad child while they are sad. And it's kind of that way with stories, in that the one I'm crafting, the one that is fresh to me, the one that I'm looking forward to delivering, that's my favorite at that time. That's the one that I'm so keen to share. But it can shift. It does
yeah,
shift.
yeah, it does. Oh, look, I completely get it. I think it for me, the stories, it's like being picked. It's like it wanders in my consciousness, and okay, this is the story that that wants to be told through me. So that's my process. So you talked a little bit about crafting there. Can you expand more on what you do to prepare a story after you've found it? What sort of
Yeah.
things do you do?
Okay. First thing you need to find is your ending, so that everything will be tailored for that destination, so that every word is in the service of the payoff, because the last line is the most important line in any story. That's the thing that they carry away. And then once you've got that, you need to know when to begin the story, because you can change the meaning of it. Like Theseus is a good example. If I want it to be a hero story, I stop at the moment he's defeated the Minotaur and he's escaping, and then he's a hero. But if I want it to be a tragic story, I'll go on to his betrayal of, what's her name? Ariadne, and then his betrayal of his father, and then it gives it a more bitter taste to it, which is my preference because it's got molasses. So you work out, so where am I going? And you want to start as far into the story as possible, with as least amount of introduction. Apparently one of the tricks with teenage stories is to do in media res, and sort of start almost at the climax, and just say, so they were running, and they were going, and you just, as if they just turned on the TV halfway through the movie, and you don't give them any context, and you just go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but with other less challenging audiences, you do that, and you're folding in as much information as you can. And often I like dialogue, because dialogue can give character and convey the information, and without, and and first there were this sister and this is, like, if you can find a more active, interactive personification, to do it, I'd rather do that. So you're building towards what's your moment of transformation, and yes, so once you've got where you're going, then you've got the tone, then what you want to do, and then you think about your point of view character. So it might not, often it'll be the lead character, the protagonist who's doing, but you can have a lot of fun with getting an ignorant point of view character. So, like a Watson who's observing, and like The Go-Between, the book by Hartley, and it was the boy who was the go-between and had no idea what was going on with the affair and so on. So having somebody innocent and ignorant and being related, so your audience is ahead, and knows more than your point of view character can be a gift to them as well. It's really good in murder mysteries too, to just sort of say, get them so that they know, oh no, can't she see what's happening? You know, that sort of build
Yeah, yeah.
up. Yeah. Or, you know, whether you're choosing, if you're doing a ghost story, often there's going to be a character who's going to die or be defeated. So which point of view, are you going to be the character who dies, or are you going to be the one who was trying to warn them the whole time, you know?
Oh wow. So you're sort of reinventing the story for
Yeah,
yourself. Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Not memorizing and reciting. The
No.
stories remain fresh if they're of the moment, and if, like I said, I'm in service of myself as a performer, what my gift, whether it's my gifts or not, it's my passion, and
Yeah.
therefore that's what I have to share.
And imagine that your passion comes through when you're doing that as well. So I think,
People have good enthusiasm, yeah.
yeah, cool. All right. Well, I've just got one more question before we move into a story, and that is, have you got any advice for beginning and emerging storytellers of things that they can do to help? Any tips?
Um, only tell stories you love is the first one,
Yeah.
because want to do it. Okay, so you want to be a good cook, you need to eat a lot and you need to cook a lot. You want to be a good writer, you have to read a lot, you have to write a lot. You want to be a good storyteller, you have to listen to a lot of stories and you have to tell a lot of stories. And Ray Bradbury, talking about writing, said that he read so much so that when he picked up a pen, only stories could flow out because they were connected to him. It just flows out. So that you drench yourself in good stories and good storytelling, and you become a storyteller.
Oh, they're great pieces of advice. Thank you. They're wonderful. And so, would you like to introduce the story that you're telling for us today?
Well, what I wanted to share with you is a myth. It's a Norse myth, and it is designed for you, Alyssa, because it's about the gifts of immortality and eternal youth and beauty.
Oh, thanks, Joe. So, thank you very much for joining us today, Joe. It's been really a great pleasure, and I feel really honoured that you have been our first guest on the podcast. And
Yes,
we will listen to your story now. And thank you, and we'll talk to you another time.
thank you so much. You've honoured me and flattered me in a way I certainly don't deserve. But I wish you all the best of luck in continuing on your journey. Fly on and story on, Alyssa. All the best.
Thank you.
You know, I look at you and I feel like I'm in Asgard, home of the Norse gods, eternally young, eternally beautiful. So I obviously don't need to tell you about the secret of eternal life, but others might be curious, perhaps. Well, it's not really that much of a secret, is it? I mean, we all know about the golden apples of immortality. They carried those golden apples in the basket of Iduna the Fair, the goddess who shares them out with all the other gods, so that all in Asgard remain eternally young. Well, all, of course, except Odin, father of the gods, with his long beard and the crows perched on his shoulders. He has no need of youth, for he has wisdom. Does he have wisdom? He went hunting with Loki. Loki, the god of mischief. Yes, many worshippers around here. So, anyway, be that as it may, Odin and Loki did indeed go out hunting, out into the hills and up into the mountains, through the day and into the setting sun until they grew weary, cold, very hungry. They saw them cows, and it's not cattle duffing if a god does it, is it? So before long, Odin had all those stakes nicely jointed, and Loki, god of fire, had them good blaze going. But, even though that fire was hot, and even though the meat was turning in the flames, still the meat did not cook. Odin looked around, and up in those chill, dark, bleak mountains rising on either side, there's trouble afoot. And even as he said that word, the shadow of a huge bird stretched out over the light of this cold fire. A silhouette of an eagle perched against the dark sky. That's no eagle. No, I am no eagle. And your meat will never cook unless you agree to give me what I want. And they said, yes. They didn't even question him. They just handed it over, and at once, the meat began to sizzle. It's more like it. And Loki reaches out for his steak, and just then the eagle swooped down and grabbed the other end with his beak to pull it out of Loki's hand. I don't think so. And Loki grabbed a log to push the bird away. But as soon as the log touched both eagle and Loki found himself stuck fast, so that he could not let go, and the eagle took off, and there was Loki hanging from the log. Are you waiting for me to tell you about what it's like to be swept up into the clouds? How cold and clear and distant the world looked below. The eagle flew low, so that Loki was dragged banging and bashing against every rock and branch and tree stump, thumper, 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 until they were far enough away for Odin that the eagle could lay him down. I am the giant Thiassi. You see, Loki, you are not the only one who can change shape. You are here, my captive, until you agree to bring me Aduna's golden apples of immortality. And Loki, confronted with the choice, giving away the greatest treasure in all the worlds, agreed. Back at Asgard, he made friends with Iduna, fair of face, fair of nature. And it must be, as some have said, that the world is a mirror, for Iduna believed that Loki was fair too. Dear Iduna, these golden apples of immortality you have are certainly fine. They must be the second best I've ever seen. Second best? You must be mistaken, Loki. No, there can be no other apples as good as these. Why don't we put it to the test? Bring your basket of apples with you, and we will go for a little stroll so that we can compare them. And he took her firmly by the hand and led her out through the gate of Asgard, out of the protection of all the gods. The shadow of a bird passed across the sun, and Iduna shivered and would have drawn back. But it was too late. Thiassi swooped down, clutching her waist in his huge claws, and carried her away. It took a while for those in Asgard to notice she was gone. The changes came so slowly. You may have noticed this yourself with age. At first it was a new reluctance to jump out of bed in the morning. Then it became more comfortable to walk than to run. A god noticed a grey hair in the head of a goddess, and goddesses noticed crow's feet around their beloved's eyes. Odin got backache. The gods were growing old. This is a disaster. They gathered together to work out how this could possibly have happened. And who was responsible? Well, not much time spent on that. We all know where suspicion lies when anything like this would happen. Now, after a fair bit of argy-bargy, Loki did finally confess. All right, I did it, he said. Oh, but it was my fault, he said. Sorry, not sorry. That's when Thor began to throttle him. But Loki promised to get the apples back, the ones that he had caused them to lose. After all, he said, the picture of sweet reason, if you kill me, you're the ones who will suffer old age. Freya the goddess loaned him her falcon skin, and the other gods transformed him into the shape of a falcon so that he could fly up into the air. Loki the falcon flew up and onward until he came to the skies above the Asi's mighty fortress, dreary and angular. There was only one sign of life to be seen. Iduna walking the ramparts, pacing back and forth, staring towards the skies, towards her home, carrying her jewelled basket, empty. Loki turned her into a nut. And then he snatched her up in his falcon claws and soared high above them towards Asgard, home. When Thiassi returned, he found Iduna gone. He knew at once what was going on. He saw her golden apples missing, and his roar tore a hole in the heavens, and up he swirled in the form of an eagle. He knew precisely where his prey had gone. Loki flew fast as a falcon flies. But it is eagles that rule the sky. And little by little, the Asi gained on him, flying faster and faster. In Asgard, the gods lit great fires around the ramparts, waiting for the return of Loki, of Iduna, of life. The darkness grew as the day died, till the firelight was all they could see by, and there, in the distance, a moving speck, a bird, a falcon. Loki, flapping, near fainting with exhaustion, drew nearer and nearer, but behind him, almost close enough to be a second pair of wings, hovering over him was Thiassi the eagle, until Loki flew on and plummeted down into the shelter of Asgard. And at that instant the flames leapt high, scorching the wings of Thiassi, so that he dropped, burnt and dead, swelling down into the abyss below. And that was how Iduna brought youth and beauty forevermore back to where it belongs, as I can see when I look at you.
Well, that's our episode for today. I hope you've enjoyed learning about storytelling and folktale, fairytale, myth, legend, or personal tales, wonder tales, all sorts of stories, and the art of storytelling, and why we really need to continue using it today. You can find more information about me at alyssacurtain.com or at Alyssa Curtain Stories on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I hope that you can find your heart in storytelling.